The heat in San Antonio could melt steel that day. Inside Harris Auto Repair, screens flashed with data, scanners beeped, and young mechanics argued over error codes. Robert Harris, proud owner and believer in modern technology, didn't know that the lesson of his life was about to park right outside his shop. A rusted 1972 Ford F-100 rolled in, coughing smoke and nostalgia. From it stepped an old man, gray hair, hands scarred by decades of engines, and eyes that had seen more machines than any computer ever would. "Need a job," he said calmly. "Not charity." They laughed at first. But by the end of that week, no one would ever laugh at Mr. Ethan Morales again. By noon, the Texas sun had turned the street outside Harris Auto Repair into a wavering mirage. Inside, the shop hummed with the comfort of routine. Impact wrenches chattered, a compressor hissed, and two big fans shoved hot air from one corner to another without really helping. On the far wall, 3 monitors glowed with diagnostic graphs like hospital screens, pulsing lines pretending to be heartbeats. Robert Harris stood under a lifted SUV, shoulders squared, clean cap, sleeves rolled. He had the posture of a man who believed in his tools, and his tools had batteries, ports, and subscription fees. His father's photo hung over the office door, a younger man with a mustache and a cigarette, squinting into some forgotten afternoon. Robert looked at it once, then back at the tablet in his hand. "Tyler," he called, flicking grease from his fingers. "The Corolla's misfire is cylinder 3. Swap the coil and recheck trims." A lanky 20-something in a backwards cap slid out from under a Civic. "On it, boss." Mia, short, sharp, with a rag tucked in her belt, rolled a tire past the bay. "Malibu's still a ghost, Robert. Scanner shows everything within spec. No codes, no lights, just attitude." Robert set the tablet down. "Fuel trim numbers. Long term is a hair rich, not enough to flag. It stumbles under light load. We've checked MAF, plugs, coils, the usual. Reset learned values twice. Nothing." "All right," Robert said, smoothing the edge off his frustration. "We'll get it. We always do." The shop door creaked. Air shifted. Everybody looked up. A 1972 Ford F-100 rolled in like a memory that refused to fade. Sunburned blue, white roof, bed lined with old dents that had stories. The engine idled rough but steady, like a smoker who'd quit 10 years too late. The door opened, and out stepped a man who didn't hurry for anyone. Gray hair trimmed short, brown skin weathered by years of heat and work. A denim shirt clean but threadbare at the elbows. His hands were the message. Square, scarred, steady. He took off his cap. "Name's Ethan Morales," he said, voice low and even. "I hear you hire mechanics." Tyler glanced at Mia, smirking like he'd been handed a meme. "We're full up, sir," he said. "Plus, computers. Cars are different now." Ethan looked at him kindly, as if the kid had tracked mud on a clean floor but could learn to wipe his boots. "Computers tell you what they can count," he said. "Engines still talk. You just gotta listen." Robert stepped out from under the SUV, wiping his forearms with a rag that used to be white. He measured the man in front of him the way you measure a torque wrench. Calm, quiet, checking for calibration. "Mr. Morales," Robert said, extending a hand. "Robert Harris. We're not exactly hiring, but—" "You got work?" Ethan asked, shaking his hand with a grip that didn't test, only told. "I don't need charity. I need engines." There was a minute of silence that held more weight than noise. Robert felt the eyes of his crew on his back, felt the tug of his father's photo behind him. He scratched the edge of his jaw. "Tell you what," Robert said at last. "We've got a 2011 Chevy Malibu in Bay 2. Stumble under light load, no codes. My team's been on it 2 days. If you can point us right, just point, maybe we'll talk." Mia led the way, rolling her eyes at Tyler, who mouthed, "This should be good." Ethan moved without hurry, and yet nothing in his pace wasted time. He paused at the Malibu like a priest at a hospital bed. "Customer complaint?" Ethan asked. "Feels like it hesitates around 30, 40 miles an hour. Then clears up." "Worse in the heat," Mia said. Fuel trims are annoying. Slightly rich long-term, slightly lean short-term. It's playing games. Ethan nodded once. He popped the hood and didn't look for a scan tool. He breathed instead, nose close to the engine bay, eyes half-lidded, like a chef catching whether the soup needed salt. He pressed 2 fingertips on the plastic intake, as if feeling for a pulse. "Key on," he said softly. Tyler reached in and turned it. Fuel pump primed. The faint hum seemed to pass through the metal and into Ethan's fingers. His eyelids twitched. "Start it." The Malibu came alive, smooth enough to fool a novice, rough enough to annoy a pro. Ethan leaned down, listening to a sound no one else heard. He walked to the rear, sniffed near the tailpipe, came back to the bay, and shut the hood halfway. Not closed, not open, as if framing a question. "Drive it?" he asked. Robert tossed him the keys before he realized what he was doing. "Mia, go with him," he said. "Tyler, log the data. I want a live capture." They pulled onto the frontage road, sun hammering the windshield. Mia watched Ethan drive one-handed, the other resting on the shifter, fingers light. He was quiet at first, letting the car tell on itself. 30 miles an hour. The stumble came, quick and irritating, like a hiccup in a conversation you wanted to be smooth. "There," Mia said, pointing at the dash, as if the Malibu could be shamed into confessing. Ethan didn't answer. He rolled the window down and cut the AC. He listened to the sound of rubber on heat, listened to the engine's breath, listened to 1,000 small things that never made it to a screen. He eased the throttle, then held it steady, long enough to feel the stumble try to hide, long enough to make it show up again. "You hear the pump singing?" he asked finally. Mia frowned. "I hear the pump. But singing? Like a tea kettle 2 rooms away," Ethan said. "Not loud, but wrong." They looped back, past a taco stand smudged with lunch smoke, past a bus stop where heat made the air look like a curtain. Back in the bay, Tyler had a graph on the monitor and triumph in his grin. "Fuel trims went lean, then rich, then normal," Tyler said, tapping the screen. "See? Sensor says everything's fine now. I told you it's software. We can flash the PCM." Ethan leaned closer to the car, not the screen. "You're chasing the echo," he said gently. "Not the shout." Tyler bristled. "With respect, sir, GM doesn't just—" "Tyler," Robert warned. Ethan's eyes softened. "You're good," he told the kid. "You'll be great if you learn to ask why the sensor says what it says." He popped the hood again, hands moving over hoses and clamps like a pianist checking keys before the first note. He traced the fuel rail with his fingers, steady, reverent. "Has anyone checked the regulator?" he asked. Mia blinked. "It's internal to the module on this model year. If it fails, you get codes." "We don't have codes." Ethan smiled, a small thing that didn't brag. "Depends how it fails." Tyler crossed his arms. "We'd need a mechanical gauge. We rely on the rail pressure sensor, which is accurate." Ethan looked at Robert. "You got a manual pressure gauge and a T-fitting?" Robert's face betrayed just a flicker of curiosity. "In the old toolbox," he said, nodding toward a battered red chest with stickers from brands that had come and gone. He hadn't touched that drawer in a long time. Mia fetched the gauge. Ethan knelt with a stiffness that told the truth about 74-year-old knees, then worked the fitting in with a grace that told a different truth about 74-year-old hands. He didn't rush. He didn't fill the silence. He let the anticipation work on the room until even Tyler leaned in. "Key on," Ethan said. The needle jumped, then settled, just a shade shy of happy. "Start." The needle wavered, then dipped, then flickered as Ethan eased the throttle by fingertips on the cable. He didn't need the monitor graph. The gauge was a story all on its own. "See it?" he asked, eyes on the dial. Mia swallowed. "It's dancing. Regulators sticking when the demand is light," Ethan said. "Not enough to set a code. Enough to make the car stumble. Heat makes it worse." Tyler's cheeks colored. "But the sensor reads the effect," Ethan said softly. "Not the cause." Silence gathered, heavy and honest. The shop felt different for a heartbeat, like a church after a hymn. A customer in a crisp suit walked in holding a key fob with a lightning bolt on it. "Who can charge a Tesla battery that drains overnight?" he asked the room in a voice that came with a golf membership. "Not now," the room seemed to say. Robert cleared his throat. "So what's your move, Mr. Morales?" Ethan stood, slow but sure. He wiped his hands on his rag, then folded it once. Neat. "I'd drop the module, inspect the regulator. But first," he glanced at the old toolbox again as if it were a friend, "I'd like to show you something." He reached into the bottom drawer and pulled out a small hand pump with a gauge attached, ancient-looking beside the new scanners. He clipped a hose, tightened a clamp, and pressed the rubber bulb twice. The Malibu shivered. The idle smoothed for a second, then wavered, as if the car itself realized it was being watched and tried to lie better. Across the bay, Tyler's smirk died, and something like respect tried to be born. Mia didn't move. Robert felt a doorway open, a narrow one, the kind you only notice when the light hits it right. Ethan looked up, eyes steady, voice calm. "Let me run one more test," he said. "If I'm right, it'll take 5 minutes to prove." He reached for the ignition. The room held its breath. Have you ever been treated like you had nothing to offer? Until the truth spoke louder than the noise? Tell me in the comments. The key turned, and everything in Harris Auto Repair changed with the sound that followed. The Malibu's engine came to life again, and for a second it sounded normal. Then, as Ethan reached behind the manifold and tapped the pressure line with the handle of his wrench, the idle dipped, coughed, and steadied. Perfectly. Everyone froze. Robert stepped closer, eyebrows pulled tight. "What the hell did you just do?" Ethan smiled without showing teeth. "Freed the regulator. It's sticking from ethanol varnish. Happens when the car sits for weeks." Tyler leaned over the fender, watching as the gauge needle stopped flickering. His voice was softer now. "You didn't even use the scanner." "Didn't need to," Ethan said. "Engines don't hide from you if you listen." Robert let out a low whistle, half admiration, half disbelief. "You just solved a problem 3 certified techs couldn't touch." Ethan shrugged. "You got good people. Just forgot where to look." The shop felt different now. No one spoke, but something old, something quiet, had entered the room. It wasn't just respect. It was the uncomfortable realization that maybe, just maybe, they'd stopped being mechanics and started being operators. Robert crossed his arms. "All right, Mr. Morales, you've earned a day's pay. But this..." He gestured to the shop, the scanners, the tablets. "This isn't a museum. We do things modern here." Ethan wiped his hands on his rag and met his eyes. "Modern doesn't scare me. Forgetting why we started does." That line hit Robert harder than he expected. He didn't answer, just nodded toward the office. "Mia, get him some water." The afternoon stretched long and bright. The crew returned to work, but the rhythm had changed. Tyler checked every car twice, trying to see what he'd missed. Mia caught herself listening to each idle, wondering what Ethan would hear that she couldn't. Ethan, meanwhile, worked quietly. He stayed after the Malibu was fixed, helping with a brake job, sorting tools, moving like he belonged there. Around 5, as the heat began to fade and the smell of oil mixed with the evening breeze, Robert walked over. "You ever run a shop before?" Ethan looked up from a brake caliper. "Long time ago. Back when people paid cash and trusted your word more than your Yelp reviews." Robert chuckled. "Where was that?" "Here in Texas, East Side. Morales and Sons Auto. My boys left for other things. I closed it after my wife passed." Robert hesitated. "Sorry to hear that." Ethan nodded. "No need. Life's a gearbox, all about timing and patience." They shared a quiet laugh, the kind men share when words don't need to fill the air. That night after closing, Robert stayed behind, replaying the day. He walked to the wall where his father's photo hung and looked at it for a long time. "Dad," he murmured, "you'd have liked that old man." The next morning Ethan was already there, sweeping the floor. Robert frowned. "You don't have to clean, Mr. Morales. You're here to fix cars." Ethan didn't stop sweeping. Shop's like an engine. If you keep the little parts dirty, the big parts fail sooner. Robert smiled despite himself. You're impossible. Been called worse, Ethan said, straight-faced. By mid-morning, customers started rolling in. Word had already spread. A man who'd waited 3 weeks for a correct diagnosis drove in with cautious hope. A woman with an old truck said she heard the miracle man worked here now. Robert waved them off, embarrassed, but secretly proud. Tyler wasn't handling it well. He'd spent years building a reputation as Robert's right hand, the tech genius. Now the spotlight was on a man who didn't even own a phone smart enough for the shop's app. He caught Mia near the lift. You see the way everyone's drooling over him? It's like we're invisible now. Mia leaned against the fender of a Dodge Ram. Maybe we should learn from him instead of whining. Tyler scoffed. He's guessing. Old school luck. These engines are computers on wheels. Mia shrugged. Then why do his guesses always work? He didn't have an answer. That afternoon, a new challenge arrived. A black Cadillac Escalade, sleek as money and twice as loud. The driver stepped out, a man in his 50s wearing a navy suit despite the heat, watch gleaming like it belonged in a museum. His tone was pure arrogance wrapped in politeness. Car hesitates when accelerating. Dealer says it's a software issue. I don't want to wait a month. Robert nodded. We'll take a look. Ethan wiped his hands and approached slowly. Could be fuel pressure again, he said. The man's eyes narrowed. I asked for a mechanic, not a janitor. The silence hit hard. Tyler turned away. Mia's jaw tightened. Robert felt the anger rise but swallowed it. Ethan only smiled. Don't worry, sir. I'm not offended by titles, just by bad engines. He walked to the Escalade and listened to it start. The man muttered something under his breath, something about antiques and time wasters. Minutes later, Ethan pointed at the throttle body. Carbon buildup, drive-by-wire delay, clean it, reset adaptations. Robert frowned. Dealer said the same thing. Dealer didn't do it, Ethan said simply. Listen. He reached in, revved the engine twice. Smooth. The owner blinked, confused. That's it? Sometimes the answer's smaller than your ego, Ethan said, smiling politely. Mia nearly choked, trying not to laugh. The man left in silence. Robert, unable to stop grinning, turned to Ethan. You enjoy that too much. Teaching's always fun, Ethan said, even when the student doesn't know he's in class. That evening, Robert called everyone together. Listen, he began, standing by the workbench. What happened today and yesterday, that's what I want this shop to be. Not just parts and screens, skill, instinct, respect. He looked at Ethan. If you're willing, I want you here full-time. Ethan wiped his hands, thoughtful. You sure your crew's ready for a dinosaur in the ranks? Tyler's expression said no, but Mia spoke first. We could use a little Jurassic wisdom. Laughter broke the tension. Robert extended his hand again. Welcome aboard, Mr. Morales. Ethan shook it. Just Ethan's fine. As the team went back to closing the shop, the golden sunset leaked through the bay doors, painting the tools in warm light. For the first time in a long while, the shop felt alive. Not automated, but human again. That night, as the city lights blinked awake, Robert sat in his truck outside the closed garage. He could still hear the old Ford idling in his mind, that stubborn rhythm that refused to die. He realized the sound wasn't just mechanical, it was a heartbeat. And somewhere deep down, he knew, the week ahead would test that heartbeat like never before. If you believe experience always beats arrogance, give this video a like. By Friday morning, the heat had already turned the concrete yard into a frying pan. The garage doors stood open, fans spinning uselessly. Business was booming. Word about the old man who fixes the unfixable had traveled faster than Robert expected. A camera crew from a local auto channel even called asking for an interview, but Robert refused. We're not clowns, he said. We fix cars. Ethan, as usual, arrived before anyone else. He brewed coffee that smelled stronger than gasoline and cleaned the workbench until it gleamed. He didn't say much, he never did. but the shop always seemed to work smoother when he was around. By 10 a.m., the calm broke. A silver Tesla Model S rolled up to the bay, smooth and silent as a ghost ship. The owner stepped out wearing a white shirt that probably cost more than Robert's entire toolbox. He was mid-30s, slick hair, smart watch, and a smirk that belonged on a billboard. He looked around the shop like it was beneath him. "You Robert Harris?" he asked, pulling off his sunglasses. Robert nodded. "That's me. What can we do for you?" "My name's Chase Danner, corporate consultant. My car's got an issue your dealership monkeys couldn't fix." Tyler grinned, already intrigued. "What kind of issue?" "The main screen freezes, randomly. Sometimes the car loses drive assist. Tesla support says it's firmware, but every time they update it, it gets worse." He looked around and stopped at Ethan, who was wiping his hands on a rag. "You don't look like a software guy." "I'm not," Ethan said calmly, "but I can listen to what your car's trying to tell you." Chase raised an eyebrow. "Listen, it's not a carburetor, old-timer." Mia crossed her arms. "You might be surprised." Chase ignored her. "Fine, impress me." They rolled the Tesla into Bay 3. Tyler connected the laptop, scrolling through menus. Robert watched Ethan stand at the front of the car, hands in pockets, eyes half closed like he was waiting for it to speak first. Tyler muttered, "No fault codes. Diagnostics all clean." "Run it anyway," Robert said. After 10 minutes, Tyler shrugged. "Everything's good. If it's software, we can't fix it here." Chase smirked. "Didn't think so." Ethan tilted his head. "You mind if I take a look?" Chase hesitated. "Be my guest, Grandpa." The air went tight. Ethan didn't flinch. He opened the hood, not that there was much to see, and ran his hand along the front seal, the wiring, the battery terminals. Then he crouched, checking under the wheel well, then the rear harness near the charge port. His movements were deliberate, patient, the kind of patience that drives impatient people insane. Chase scoffed. "What exactly are you looking for? Fairies?" Ethan smiled. "Loose ground." Tyler frowned. "There are 8 ground points on this model, all tested fine." "Tested fine," Ethan repeated softly. "Not felt fine." He reached for a small wrench and loosened one ground strap. The bolt was tight, but the contact beneath was corroded, invisible unless you looked close. He cleaned it with a wire brush, tightened it back down, and stood up. "Try it now," Ethan said. Tyler tapped the screen. It booted instantly, faster than before. No flicker, no delay. Chase blinked. That was luck." Robert folded his arms. "Luck doesn't clean oxidation, sir." Mia grinned. "Seems like experience beats Wi-Fi again." Chase's face hardened. "You people think you're clever. You just unplugged and plugged something back in." "Big deal." Ethan turned toward him, voice steady. "Sometimes big problems hide behind small arrogance." The entire shop froze. You could hear a socket drop 3 bays away. But Chase wasn't done. He pulled out his phone and started filming. "Let's see if the internet thinks you're as smart as you believe, old man. Say hi to my followers. They love seeing mechanics try to fix computers." Robert stepped forward. "Hey, that's enough." Ethan put a hand on his arm. "Let him." He leaned slightly toward the phone, face calm, voice like gravel smoothed by time. "If a machine stops listening, you don't shout louder. You check the connection." He walked away, leaving Chase speechless and holding a camera that suddenly didn't feel so powerful. That video went viral by afternoon. Not because Chase posted it, but because Mia did. She clipped the moment, added the caption, "Wisdom doesn't need Wi-Fi." Thousands of comments flooded in overnight. "My grandpa could fix anything with a wrench and a prayer." "Respect the old hands." "That man just schooled a Tesla." Robert was stunned. "We just became famous." Ethan shook his head. "Fame's a tool, not a purpose. Use it wrong, it breaks you." But the truth was, things did change. New customers came. Old ones returned. The shop became something rare, a bridge between eras. Weeks passed. Ethan worked quietly, training Mia and even Tyler on the subtleties of listening. He made them diagnose without scanners once a week, by smell, vibration, and instinct. Tyler hated it at first, but when he caught a misfire no sensor could detect, he started believing. Robert, too, began to change. He still used the new tech, but now he cross-checked it with human sense. Data tells you what? Experience tells you why, he'd quote Ethan, almost proudly. But peace never lasts long in stories like these. One hot Thursday afternoon, as the crew ate tacos on the workbench, a dark shadow rolled into the shop. A convoy of glossy pickup trucks carrying banners from Mendoza Motors, the largest repair chain in San Antonio. Out of the lead truck stepped a tall man in his 50s, sharp suit, gold watch, grin like a knife. Robert recognized him instantly. Salvador Mendoza. Ethan froze where he stood, coffee halfway to his lips. Robert glanced at him. You know him? Ethan's jaw tightened. Used to. Mendoza spread his arms like a preacher addressing a crowd. So this is where the legend hides. The famous old mechanic who fixes Teslas with magic touch. Ethan set his cup down. Not magic, just patience. Mendoza smirked. Patience doesn't pay the bills. Skill does. Let's see how much of that you've got left. He turned to Robert. How about a little challenge? My shop against yours. We bring a problem your scanners can't solve. Winner takes the client and the city's respect. Robert looked uneasy. We're not here for circus games, Sal. But Mendoza's grin didn't fade. You scared your grandpa might lose? Ethan stepped forward. I'm not scared, Sal, but you should be. The crowd of younger mechanics from Mendoza's trucks laughed. Robert felt the tension crackle like static. Mendoza pointed toward the parking lot. Tomorrow morning, I'll bring a car that's beaten every expert I've got. Let's see if your engine whisperer still has ears. He turned and walked away, leaving the echo of his laughter behind. As the sun sank behind the bay doors, the team stood silent. Tyler broke it first. What was that about, Ethan? The old man looked at the floor. History. The kind that never quite rusts away. Robert put a hand on his shoulder. You sure you want to do this? Ethan nodded once. Some lessons can't stay half-taught. He turned toward the dark horizon outside the garage, where somewhere out there, his past waited with its engine running. Have you ever had to face someone who once made you doubt your worth? Tell me in the comments. Saturday morning arrived sharp and dry, the kind of heat that made metal groan and air shimmer above the asphalt. Robert had barely opened the shop when the rumble of diesel engines echoed from down the street, a convoy of gleaming Mendoza Motors trucks. Each one carried toolboxes and cameras. The stunt was clear. Salvador Mendoza wanted a show. Ethan stood by the bay door, coffee cup in hand, eyes steady. No words, no fear. Just the calm of a man who'd already lived through worse storms. Mendoza climbed out of his truck, crisp as ever in his pressed shirt and silver cufflinks. Behind him, his team, 5 young techs with matching uniforms, unloaded a black Volkswagen Jetta Turbo onto the shop floor. The car's hood was already open, its engine half disassembled. Mendoza smirked. She's all yours, Morales. Robert stepped closer. What's the issue? Idle surge, cold start failure, random stalls, Mendoza said. No codes, no leaks, no misfires. 3 of my shops gave up. He clapped his hands once. If you solve it, old friend, I'll admit defeat. If not, his smile turned thin. Maybe it's time to hang up your wrench. Ethan took a long look at the car, and then at Mendoza. It's been 30 years since we worked side by side, he said quietly. You used to care more about fixing engines than showing off. Mendoza's smirk faltered for a heartbeat. And you used to understand business. People pay for speed, not poetry. Then they've forgotten what real work costs, Ethan said. The crowd formed quickly. Mechanics from nearby shops, customers, curious onlookers, all drawn by the promise of a duel between 2 legends. Robert didn't like it. He leaned close to Ethan. You don't owe this guy anything. Ethan smiled. Maybe not, But the kid I used to be still wants closure. He opened the driver's door, slid inside, and turned the key. The Jetta coughed, hesitated, and idled, like it couldn't decide whether to live or die. The tack needle danced between 900 and 1200 RPM, hunting for balance. Ethan listened, eyes closed. The sound was wrong, but not random. It pulsed with rhythm, like a heartbeat out of sync. He popped the hood and leaned over the engine bay, breathing in the smell of old oil and burnt plastic. His fingers brushed the wiring harness near the intake, tracing its path like reading braille. Something wasn't right. "Vacuum leak," Tyler whispered. Ethan shook his head. If it were that simple, they'd have fixed it. This is something hiding deeper. Mia watched closely, notebook in hand. "What do you hear?" "Not hear," Ethan said softly. "Feel." He pressed his palm against the valve cover, eyes half closed. The vibration was uneven, a faint flutter, like hesitation between heartbeats. He followed the feeling down to the crank sensor housing, then froze. "Robert," he said, pointing. "Look at this mounting bolt." Robert bent down. "Looks fine." Ethan grabbed a small wrench and tightened it a quarter turn. The idol steadied for a moment, then fled again. The crowd murmured. Mendoza folded his arms. "Nice try, old man." But Ethan wasn't listening. He looked beyond the sensor, at the harness itself. A tiny nick in the insulation, no bigger than a grain of rice, barely visible where the cable rubbed against the engine mount. He pinched it gently, and the idol dropped. He released it. It rose again. "There you are," Ethan whispered. "You sneaky bastard." Mia gasped. "A broken wire?" "Half broken," Ethan said. "Heat expansion separates the copper. Cold contracts it. That's why it fails on startup." He motioned to Tyler. "Get me a soldering kit, heat shrink, and patience." The crowd pressed closer. Mendoza's face went hard. "You're bluffing." "Only if it doesn't work," Ethan said. 15 minutes later, the repair was done. Ethan wiped the sweat from his forehead, tightened the last clamp, and nodded. "Start it." Robert turned the key. The engine purred, smooth, strong, steady. The entire garage went silent. No hunting idle, no stall, no error codes, just perfect, rhythmic life. Mia covered her mouth. He did it. Ethan stepped back, hands resting on his hips, breathing slow. "Every machine has a heartbeat," he said. "Sometimes it's just faint." The crowd broke into applause. Even the Mendoza techs couldn't hide their awe. Mendoza, red-faced, tried to smile. "All right, you fixed it. Congratulations. Enjoy your applause." But Ethan didn't look at him. He was staring at the car, then at his own reflection in the polished fender. For a moment his face softened, and something old flickered in his eyes. Grief, pride, and peace, all tangled together. Robert clapped him on the shoulder. "That was beautiful, Ethan." Ethan nodded once. "It wasn't about winning." Mia tilted her head. "Then what was it about?" He looked toward Mendoza. "About remembering why I started." Mendoza took a step forward, voice quieter now. "You always were the better mechanic," he said. "I was just better at pretending I wasn't jealous." Ethan smiled faintly. "We both lost our way somewhere between the bolts and the bills." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Mendoza extended his hand. Ethan hesitated, then shook it. The crowd erupted again, phones filming, people cheering. But for Ethan, the noise faded. He wasn't hearing applause. He was hearing closure. Later that night, the shop was quiet again. Robert and the crew sat around the workbench, the air still humming with the memory of victory. Tyler looked at Ethan. "I'll be honest, I didn't believe in half of what you said when you walked in here." Ethan smiled. "That's good. Belief comes after proof." Mia asked softly, "How did you know it was that wire?" Ethan shrugged. "I didn't. I just listened." Robert laughed. "You make it sound like engines talk." Ethan looked at him, eyes glinting. "They do. Most folks just forgot the language." The crew fell quiet, soaking it in. Outside, the Texas night was thick with cicadas and dust. Robert leaned back, smiling. You know, Morales, I think the city's gonna be talking about this for a while. Ethan looked up at the ceiling fans spinning slow. Then maybe they'll also remember what matters. He stood, grabbing his worn jacket. I'm heading out. Long week. Same time Monday? Robert asked. Ethan chuckled. If the good Lord and my knees allow. As he stepped into the warm night, Robert called out, Hey, Ethan, what was that thing your father used to say? About theory and practice? Ethan paused in the doorway, the moonlight catching the lines of his face. He smiled. Theory tells you how something should work. Practice tells you how it does. Wisdom tells you when to trust which. And with that, he disappeared into the night, leaving the hum of engines behind him, and a shop forever changed. If you've ever had to prove yourself against someone who doubted you, drop it in the comments. Months passed, and the rhythm of Harris Auto Repair changed forever. The shop had become something else, not just a business, but a classroom. Every morning before the first car rolled in, Ethan gathered the crew for what he called 5-minute lessons that take a lifetime to learn. He'd hold apart in his hand a spark plug, a bearing, a simple bolt, and make them see philosophy inside metal. This, he'd say, tapping a spark plug, doesn't care if the engine's German, Japanese, or American. It just wants a clean connection. That's life. Stay grounded, make good contact, and you'll fire every time. They listened. Even Tyler, who used to roll his eyes, began keeping a small notebook filled with Ethan's sayings. Mia often caught him quoting them without realizing. Business was booming. Cars from all over Texas came in, sometimes from other states. Reporters called. Auto schools invited Ethan to give talks, but he always said no. I don't need a podium, he told Robert one evening. Engines are the best students. They never interrupt. Robert laughed, wiping his hands. You could teach these lessons to people, you know. Ethan looked at him. I already am. Then came the morning Ethan didn't show up. At first, no one panicked. The man was old. Maybe he'd overslept. But when the clock hit 9 and his coffee cup was still empty, Robert called his number. No answer. He drove to Ethan's small rented room on the west side, a quiet place above an old diner. The landlady met him at the door. Mr. Morales left early, she said. Looked pale, though. Said he was going to the shop. Robert frowned. He never came. They found him an hour later, sitting on a bench near the old railroad tracks. The morning sun was hot, but he didn't seem to notice. He was just breathing slow, eyes closed, listening to the distant rumble of trains. Ethan, Robert said gently, sitting beside him. You all right? Ethan smiled faintly. Heart's acting up again. Doctor told me to slow down. Robert's voice cracked. Then why are you out here? Ethan opened one eye. Engines, trains. They keep me company. Robert didn't know what to say. He just sat there, letting the silence do what words couldn't. A few days later, Ethan was back at the shop, stubborn as ever. Don't look at me like that, he told the team. If I stay home, I rust. But they all noticed the change. His movements were slower, his breath shorter. He took more breaks and carried less weight. Still, he never lost that spark in his eyes. One afternoon, as the crew struggled with a stubborn transmission, Ethan stepped forward, leaning slightly on a stool. Don't fight the bolts, he said softly. Respect them. They've been sitting longer than you've been thinking. Tyler grinned. Pretty sure you've said that one before. Good lessons don't expire, Ethan said, smiling. He guided their hands, showing a trick with leverage that made the stuck piece turn loose like magic. The shop erupted in laughter and cheers. That night, Tyler uploaded a short clip of the moment to the shop's social media with the caption, "When wisdom turns bolts faster than muscles ever could." It went viral, again. But behind the smiles, Robert could see it. Ethan was fading. One evening, as they locked up, Ethan lingered near the doorway, looking at the sunset through the open bay. Robert, he said, voice low. You ever notice how engines and people are the same? How so? When they're young, they run hot, push hard. burn bright. Then one day, something small starts to wear. A gasket, a seal, a valve. You patch it, you tune it, but eventually, it's time to rest. Robert swallowed hard. You're not done yet. Ethan smiled sadly. Everyone says that right before the last lap. The next week, Ethan didn't come to work again. This time he didn't call either. Robert visited the hospital, finding him sitting up, oxygen tube in his nose, TV on low volume showing an old NASCAR race. Caught me slacking, huh? Ethan said, trying to sound casual. You scared the hell out of us, Robert said. Can't scare the dead, Ethan said with a weak grin. Robert shook his head. Don't talk like that. Ethan's tone softened. You know, Robert, the shop's in good hands. Yours, Mia's, even that hothead Tyler's. You don't need me anymore. Robert's voice cracked. We do, Ethan. You're the heart of this place. Ethan looked at him with quiet warmth. Then make sure it keeps beating. A few days later, Robert found a letter taped to the office door. Handwritten, oil-stained, folded twice. It read, Don't close the shop when I go. Keep teaching. Give the kids a chance to learn what books can't say. And remember, every noise has a reason, in machines and in people. Listen before you fix. Inside the envelope was Ethan's old wrench, the one he'd used on the Malibu, its handle polished smooth by time. Robert stood there, holding it like a relic, until tears blurred the metal. Weeks passed. The bench where Ethan used to sit stayed empty, but his presence lingered. Customers still asked for him. Mechanics from other shops stopped by just to stand in the bay and say, This is where it happened. Tyler now ran diagnostics like Ethan, by ear first, by screen second. Mia began teaching apprentices from a nearby trade school. And Robert, though he still checked every invoice and schedule, found himself pausing sometimes just to listen. To the hum of engines, the rhythm of the fans, the heartbeat of the place Ethan had revived. One night, alone in the shop, Robert hung a small brass plaque above the old toolbox. It read, Theory tells you how something should work. Practice tells you how it does. Wisdom tells you when to trust which. E. Morales, Master Mechanic. He stood back, staring at the plaque through watery eyes. Outside, thunder rolled low across the Texas sky. Somewhere in that rumble, he thought he heard the familiar cough of an old Ford F-100 starting one last time. If this story touched your heart, give it a like. And if you've ever learned something unforgettable from an old hand, share it in the comments. The summer after Ethan's passing arrived quietly, without ceremony or fanfare. His absence wasn't loud. It was heavy, like the silence that fills a room after music stops. Still, Harris Auto Repair didn't slow down. If anything, it grew. Word began to spread that the shop was opening its doors to new apprentices, young mechanics who couldn't afford formal training, high school dropouts looking for purpose, veterans trying to find their footing again. Robert decided to rename the place in Ethan's honor. Under the old metal sign that still read Harris Auto Repair, a new line appeared, Morales Mechanical School, where engines and people find their rhythm. Every morning, the garage came alive with sound, wrenches clinking, fans humming, and the laughter of young voices mixing with the smell of oil and hope. Ethan's name was spoken every day, sometimes through lessons, sometimes through memories, sometimes just through silence. He was gone, but somehow he was everywhere. In the old toolbox near the wall, in the wrench he left behind, in the plaque that caught the sun each morning. Mia had become the lead instructor. Her tone had softened, her patience deepened. She taught her students the same way Ethan had taught her, through presence, through patience, through meaning hidden in small things. Don't just fix the car, she would say. Listen to it. Try to understand what it's trying to tell you. One afternoon, a nervous student named Danny broke a bolt inside a cylinder head and nearly burst into tears. Mia crouched beside him, her voice calm and warm. Hey, she said, we've all done worse. The bolt can be replaced. You can't. Danny looked up, smiling through embarrassment. It was Ethan's voice she was channeling, soft, humble, full of quiet wisdom. Even Tyler had changed. Once the skeptic, now he was the tech lead. He'd still use the scanner, but every now and then he'd unplug it, close his eyes, and listen. Really listen. When the younger mechanics asked him what he was doing, he'd grin and say, "Just checking the pulse." Robert often stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching him with pride. The shop had become something Ethan would have loved, a perfect balance of technology and intuition, precision and soul. Then one morning, a letter arrived in the mail. The envelope bore a name Robert hadn't seen in months. Salvador Mendoza. "Robert," the letter read, "I heard about Morales. He was the best of us. I'd like to sponsor your school. Tools, scholarships, equipment. Consider it my way of making peace with the man who once showed me what real pride looks like." Robert smiled as he read it. "You finally learned, Sal," he murmured, tacking the letter to the office wall right beneath Ethan's plaque. Months later, the shop hosted its first graduation ceremony. There were no suits, no polished speeches, just folding chairs between the lifts, an old speaker playing country songs, and banners hand-painted by the apprentices. Families came. Kids in overalls stood proudly beside their first toolboxes. Engines idled in the background like applause. Robert stepped up to speak, his voice rough but steady. "Ethan Morales taught us that being a mechanic isn't about fixing cars," he said. "It's about fixing trust. Between people, between generations, between what's old and what's new. He showed us that machines are just mirrors. They reflect the care we put into them." He held up Ethan's old wrench. Its handle was scratched and smooth from decades of use. This wrench belonged to a man who believed no noise was meaningless and no life was beyond repair. From now on, every student who graduates will sign their name inside this handle, so his story keeps turning with every hand that holds it. He handed it to Danny, the same student who had once cried over a broken bolt. Danny's hands trembled as he carved his initials inside the metal. The room broke into applause. Some smiled, some cried. And for a moment, it felt like Ethan himself was there, leaning against the wall, smiling quietly at all the noise. That night, when everyone had gone home, Robert stayed behind. The sun was setting low, spilling a golden glow across the shop floor. Dust floated in the light, turning the air soft and alive. He walked to the old toolbox that had belonged to Ethan and opened the top drawer. Inside was a folded note he'd never seen before, written in that same slanted, careful handwriting. It read, "If you're reading this, you kept the shop alive. That means you listened. Remember, experience isn't what happens to you. It's what you learn from what happens to you. And if someday someone asks how to become a great mechanic, tell them this. You fix cars with your hands, you fix lives with your heart." Robert stood there for a long time, staring at the paper until the words blurred. He set the note down gently, closed the drawer and whispered, "Rest easy, old man. We've got it from here." Outside, thunder rolled faintly in the distance, slow and familiar. Robert looked up, smiling through tears. Because to him, that sound wasn't thunder. It was the old Ford F-100, starting one last time. Stories like this deserve to be shared. If you believe experience and humility still matter in this world, leave a comment, give this video a like, and subscribe for more stories that keep the human spirit alive.